Well, good afternoon. I'm Pastor Curtis Brophy, and on behalf of Lookout Mountain Community Church, we would like to welcome you here today. It certainly is our privilege to host you all today, but we regret it is on the circumstances at hand to say goodbye to our beloved Kathleen Kitty Joanne Wilder. Brothers and sisters, we do not come here today for a funeral. We, in remembering Kitty's life, may mourn, but we are also here today to celebrate Kitty's resurrection in Jesus Christ, her Lord and Savior. Certainly Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. Any one of us who interacted with Kitty for just the smallest time knew how strong her faith was. Because when you interacted with Kitty, she constantly sought the mind of Christ. Maybe you've heard her say to you at one point or another, I wonder what Jesus thinks about this situation. Kitty was certainly an extreme example that even in taking on leukemia, the Lord's grace was sufficient, for Christ's power was made perfect in Kitty's weakness. Nancy Short said it best in saying, Kitty's battle with leukemia in this last year and 3 months has been incredible. It's also been horribly hard, excruciatingly painful, maddening, and so many other descriptors. But I also have to say it's been glorious and magnificent as Kitty has faced it, most of the time with incredible grace and gratitude. No, I don't believe she'd say she was grateful for the leukemia, but she was genuinely able to find multiple places of gratitude in each day, which miraculously brought her into spaces of joy. Why? Because even in her weakness, in talking to both Jim and Kitty, they had prayed asking the Lord, what did the Lord think of their situation? And both of them heard separately from one another, this is for my glory. Certainly, the Lord used Kitty and continues to use Jim for his glory here at Lookout. And as I was trying to think of the ways that Kitty and Jim have affected this congregation, the one thing that came to mind was Emmanuel journaling. And if I may, I might just take a moment. I sat down at my computer the other day and I got a piece of paper out. And I just started going through the Emmanuel journaling, and this is what I wrote down that I'd like to share with you all. Dear God, I'm thankful for every second, minute, day, and week you allowed each one of us to spend with Kitty. She was your blessing to each one of us and our unique needs. Then the Lord speaks. Dear child of mine, you're welcome. Kitty finds joy in me 24/7 for all eternity. I see each one of you in your grief, but I equally see how she lives on in each one of you. She is never all that far away, and my children, if you follow my disciple Kitty's footsteps, you too will see her again. I value you and I weep with you. But remember, weeping may linger for the night, but joy comes even in the morning, and that's spelled M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. Joy can come even in our grief. I understand how you feel. Certainly my ways are not your ways. I understand the void you feel. But if you felt like Kitty got you, how much more do I, the one who created you, get you? I'm glad to be with you, and I can do something in and through you. You each are my beloved, and I will carry you through any dark valley, even this valley of the shadow of death. I will strengthen you with my grace. I will continue to provide for you, even in ways you cannot see or imagine. Remember how I have carried you this far, and oh, how far we have come over the past year and a half or so in this pandemic. Remember, I am with you always, to the end of the age. As we go through this service today, you'll be hearing from several people, but two that I'd like to point out that many of you probably have met personally is first the Reverend Way Wooldridge. He is a Master of Divinity from Southwest Baptist Seminary and a Master of Strategic Studies, U.S. Army War College. He became the Executive Director of Life Model Works on September 1st of 2020. The principles behind the Life Model are transforming his life, work, and personal relationships every single day. Ray is a retired U.S. Army chaplain, a brigadier general, with 43 years of service with the military, in uniform as a civilian. A skilled public communicator, he also gets joy in coaching leaders to discover their uniqueness and unleash their potential. He is married for 36 years to Deborah. He is the father of 5, grandfather of 4, and he loves good coffee, skiing, and board games. The Reverend Chris Corsi, on the other hand, kept it short and sweet. He is a good, close family friend, collaborator and colleague of the Wild. And it's one thing, at the end of the service, there will be a slideshow showing, you'll see a young Chris and a young Kitty, so you get an idea of how long Chris and Kitty have known each other. And so now I'm going to go ahead and hand up on the baton.
Thanks, Kurt. Good afternoon. None of us want to be here, but we're also happy to be here. We're happy to be in this together. And Jim and family, our hearts are heavy with you. We reflected last week, many of us were in Holland, Michigan for Thrive training. The whole Life Model Works team was there virtually. And of course, Chris and Jen were there, and some of you were there, and it was just a joy through tears as we spent time together remembering Kitty. She was a wonderful wife, mother, grandmother, pastor, follower of Jesus who lived fully from the heart Jesus gave her. A stalwart champion of the life model, and eternity will tell the full story of the vast reach of her influence. She trained thousands of us worldwide for decades. Chris told me about a training that you were in, was it last night, Chris? With our friends in Korea, training them in skills that Kitty helped us develop, that Kitty lived. And there were a lot of tears in that gathering last night from Korea. She modeled elder maturity. She was a guardian of the life model legacy. I came into this late in life. I like to say kicking and screaming. And it's changing my life. And I remember emails she would send me that showed her guardianship. She would say, now, Ray, you know, Chris, have you had those conversations with Kitty? Jim always says, and it was just such a blessing. She even did that when I went to their house a few times. She dedicated her life to doing all she could to live and spread the life model widely. And she's going to be missed by thousands, but none more than Jim and family, and the Life Model family, many of whom are joining us online. As I reflected on what I wanted to share with you, I realized that every single book Jim Wilder has written, and there's a lot of them, and more coming, I'm sure, has Kitty's imprint on every single page. And I think Jim agree, I know you agree with this, it would be impossible to overstate her influence. If Kitty were here, I would say, Deborah, and Kitty's listening, I know she is, she's in that great cloud of witnesses. Deborah and I would say, we wish we could have gotten to know you even better. We're thankful for you. She was our trainer in Track 2 last year of Thrive Training. And she graced our home with Jim for a meal last summer and was so hospitable to me as I came on board with Life Model Works. I think the story will be told in eternity, but were it not for Kitty's sacrificial service in the late 90s and early 2000s for years without pay, Shepherd's House would not have survived and Life Model Works might not exist today, and many of the resources that are changing lives around the world probably would not be as prolific as they have been. What Life Model Works is doing, has done in the past, is doing now, and what Thrive Today is doing would not have been possible without Kitty. Without Kitty, relational brain skills, it was Jim and Chris and Kitty working them out, and they're changing lives. So she lived a life filled with Jesus' presence. She modeled how we as a people act in every up and every down, and then she worked it out. I want to share a poem that Michael Sullivan, who was our previous executive director and is now on our staff in another capacity, he wrote a poem, and this is just for today, so I'm going to read it to you. Our Kitty, unpretentious and brave, outspoken yet wise, with a color-filled heart for us all, a true, beautiful soul who with sparkling eyes aided us to rise up from the fall. This was our dear Kitty. Though each of us dies, she's alive at the heavenly ball. So we grieve, not for her, for she's won the prize. We all win if we answer God's call. Michael Sullivan. Jim, our hearts and our prayers are with you and your family today and in the future. God bless you.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Pastor Kurt. When Kitty passed, Jim let me know that she passed and basically said, Chris, Kitty wants you to lead this service. And I had a couple reactions to that. My first reaction was very humbled that she would want me to do the service. And then my other reaction was, wow, how do I do that? It's a big deal. Trying to use words to honor Kitty, words just don't seem to fully fit. Kitty was one of the tall trees in the forest, so I had the pleasure of kind of growing up under her and under Jim. And so we're wearing masks today for a very specific reason, that Kitty, through her own health struggles, became really passionate about spreading joy and not spreading viruses. And so it's very important to her that we spread joy today and not viruses. And so we really, on behalf of the family, really appreciate you all honoring that and respecting that. Kitty was very much a gentle protector and very passionate about trying to live in this world as a gentle protector. And today we're going to have some remembrances, some reflections, some readings, and some sharing. If you knew Kitty, you would know she would want us to keep this concise. So we're going to try to keep this as concise as we can, but we do aim to honor Kitty with this time together, and we thank you that you're all here and you're all online with us as well. So Joanne's going to sing some verses for us.
Good morning. We would like to stand up. We're going to sing a couple verses of Oh God, Our Help in Ages. Oh God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. 1,000 ages in your sight are like an evening gone, short as the watch that ends the night before the rising sun. Oh God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. Seated.
Thank you, Joanne. I'm going to read the obituary for Kathleen Kitty Joanne Braben Wilder, who greeted this world on October 15th, 1951 in Big Rapids, Michigan. As a toddler, she traveled with her parents, Wallace, Wally, and Violet and Vi Braben to Nigeria to do the Lord's work as missionaries. Kathy Jo, as she was called then, was the first of 3 siblings. Her brother Bob and sister Karen joined the family in Nigeria. Kitty would spend the majority of the years through high school in boarding schools in Nigeria. Kitty found a love in Nigeria and of Africa that she would have for the rest of her life. After high school, Kitty moved to Marshall, Minnesota in the care of her aunt while her parents remained in Nigeria. Kitty then attended Oak Hills Bible College in Bemidji, Minnesota. And it was at Oak Hills where on Valentine's Day in 1971, she had her first date with fellow student Jim Wilder. That memorable date started with the movie Ben-Hur and ended with Jim's car stuck in a ditch. But they would be married just 10 months later on December 18th, 1971. 4 years later, while Jim finished his studies at Bemidji State University, Kitty gave birth to her first child, James. The small family moved to Pasadena, California when Jim started graduate school later that year. Displeased with her hospital experience with her first child, Kitty gave birth to their second son, Raymie, at home less than 2 years later. Kitty loved being a mother and chose work that allowed her to watch her children while Jim finished his PhD. In addition to typing all his papers, she worked as a typist, receptionist, executive secretary, among other jobs, to help support her family and yet have time with her young boys. On the side, she audited all the marriage and family counseling courses at the graduate school and kept the family going on camping trips. When her boys were older, Kitty would decide, with the support and encouragement of Jim, to return to school. She obtained her associate's degree, became certified as a massage therapist, interpreter for the deaf, and eventually was ordained as a pastor. She began working with the ministry in Shepherd's House in 2001 and started training and teaching in the Life Model in 2002, where she would find her passion for teaching and helping others. She loved leading her track in the Thrive training program she helped develop. Throughout her life, Kitty gave freely of her time to others. She spent years volunteering with an organization interpreting and helping the deaf and blind community. She was an active member of many ministries, including teaching repeatedly at Youth with a Mission for over 15 years. Kitty traveled the world teaching and ministering in South Korea, Hawaii, the Netherlands, Thailand, Germany, Ecuador, Canada, Hungary, Romania, Poland, and Mexico. She traveled for fun to France, Spain, England, Italy, Switzerland, Costa Rica, Jamaica, and still had a long list of other places that she wanted to visit. In 2001, Kitty and Jim relocated to Colorado to be closer to their sons and their families. She enjoyed spending as much time with them as possible when she was not traveling the world teaching and ministering to others. She loved family gatherings and hearing about what each grandchild was doing. She loved giving them gifts based on their interests. Kitty's family was formed by births, blending, and bonding. Many people identified her as a sister, as a mother, as a grandmother for them. Quinn Wilder, Gabriel Wilder, Leela Wilder, Nicole Wilder, Zach Wilder, Samuel Wilder, Brianna Brum, Jolena Brum, Chase Stevens, Ethan Stevens, Avery Stevens, Claire Wilder, Kendra Wilder. Begin the list of those who experienced her as a grandmother. In March 2020, Kitty, after receiving a series of unexplained fevers and other health problems, received the devastating diagnosis of acute myeloid leukemia. She did not allow the diagnosis to change who she was, however. With new treatments and lots of love and care by Jim, Kitty was also able to put the cancer in remission and continued to live a rich life, spending as much time as possible with all those she loved. She even recovered from a stroke and heart failure in May of 2021. On July 26, 2021, with Jim and her sons, James and Raymie, by her side, Kitty left her suffering behind and went to be with the Lord that she loved so much. She left behind uncountable numbers of loved ones and family that will cherish and remember her. One of Kitty's favorite verses was 2 Chronicles 16, verse 9. For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. I'm going to invite James to come up here and share some words.
When I thought about what I would say today, my first thought was what I could get through without crying. And of course I quickly figured out that was impossible. My mom talked often about her genetic predisposition to crying, what she called her Windquist tears. I still don't know how many times I even just said goodbye to her after having lunch that she didn't cry. I thought about maybe something I could share, having been her son for those 46 years. And I also decided there wasn't probably much I couldn't share that everyone didn't already know. She talked open and honestly about everything. I think even her love of the bathrooms of the world was well known. I thought, well, maybe I can share something about her generosity. And again, I think everyone here was touched by that. The way she would love to give gifts, the way she would love to find something or remember something someone had said one time. I would even bet that there's any number of you that at one point had a cupboard full of pink marshmallow Peeps because when you were 10 you said you liked them. No, what I decided the best way to honor my mom today would be doing one of her favorite exercises. And that's a thankfulness exercise. She always wanted at least 3 things every day that you would be thankful for. And so I'm going to try and get through that. First of all, I'm thankful for my family. My dad, who has been that oak for my mom not only these 50 years, but these last 16 months, so much more so, and has had that heavy burden. I'm thankful for my wife, my kids, both of my brothers, Raymie and Simon, that have given me so much joy and so many great hugs these last few weeks. Second, I'm thankful that my mom touched so many people. It is so wonderful to see and hear online today, to meet people whose lives she touched that I haven't even yet met. And I'm thankful that she had those years here to spread that joy, which is what she wanted to do. And so finally, I'm thankful for my mom. I'm thankful that it hurts so much to miss her because of what that means about the love and the bonds that we had together. I'm thankful for you, Mom.
Thank you, James. I'd like to invite Raymie to come up and share some words.
I wrote mine down. I didn't think I could do what my brother did. My mom loves stories. She loved to tell them, and she loved to listen to them. And I grew up hearing her stories, and I know so much about my family and who I am based on hearing her tell and retell stories about our life, both joyful and sad. Among many other topics, my mom loved telling stories about me. And today I want to share a few stories that she liked to tell. I was born on the dining room table of our small apartment in Pasadena, California. And it was not by accident that she gave birth to me on the dining room table. When my brother was born not quite 2 years earlier, all she had wanted to do was to hold him in her arms. But the doctors took him for their tests and all those things that were important but kept James from being in her arms. So when it came time for my birth, she decided that she wasn't going to let some doctor keep her baby from her, and she was going to have me at home where she was in charge. So when I was born, a full month after the due date, it was on our dining room table, and she did it that way not because it was easier, it wasn't, but because she knew then that nobody could tell her how long she could hold her new baby. So that's my mom, and that's how she welcomed me into this world. It's a story about me, but I think it tells you a lot about her. As I grew up, my mom realized I was a kid that was full of energy. And another story she loved to tell was how Raymie never walked anywhere. He only knew how to run, bounce, flip, cartwheel, climb, and do just about anything but walk. She loved to tell that story and focused on my energy and how happy it made her to see me full of life. But the result of my energy is that I broke things and I made a lot of messes. And I can very clearly recall the door frames throughout our house being covered with smudges and scratches from my dirty hands as I'd run around jumping and smacking them every time I ran by. As a parent now, I can see how easily some of those same things could frustrate you. And my kids have heard me get frustrated for doing some of the same things that I did as a kid. But my mom never scolded me for those smudges and messes and broken things. And later she'd tell me, little boys should be allowed to play and run around. And I'm sure she thought the same for little girls, she just didn't have one. She loved and encouraged that energy my entire life and never grew tired of talking about her Raymie that never could walk anywhere. It's a great fun story about me, but again, I love what it says about my mom and how she viewed the world. And as much as she loved telling stories, she loved hearing them too. She loved hearing stories so much that she even had a funny way to make my dad tell a story for her. My mom would launch into a story, and right when she's rolling, she'd stop and turn to my dad and say, "Jim, you tell this one, you know it better than me." And my dad, he might sigh, but he picked up the story right there, and he'd finish it exactly as she knew he would. And she was so delighted to sit back and listen to him tell stories too. But not all the stories she told were happy ones. She shared her sad stories too, and she definitely had more sad stories than I would have liked. But she taught me a lot about being sad and how we can be sad but still be happy that we're together. It's a lesson I'm still working on, and her death is forcing me to embrace. All the way to the end of my mom's life, she continued to tell stories. I was visiting her during what ended up being the last of many hospital visits, less than a week before she died when a nurse came in. And she loved her nurses and loved hearing about their lives. She told me so many stories about her nurses and doctors and lab techs and food service workers. And we joked with her that she had way too many friends at the hospital. And on this day when the nurses walked in, she launched right in to introduce me, and she started telling them one of her favorite stories about me, which is about how I came to get the name Raymie. It's one of her funnier stories, and I'd happily share it with anyone that hasn't heard it. But I had heard it before, at least 1,000 times. And I laughed as she laughed telling it, not realizing it was the last time I'd ever hear her tell that story. There's a lot I can carry forward in memory of my mom. But I'm trying to keep things simple. I want to tell more stories, and I want to hear more stories. I want to laugh and be happy in the joy. And I want to be someone, and this is the part I'm going to struggle with, I want to be someone like my mom that can tell my sad stories and hear your sad stories and be happy together in our sadness. Because those are some of the most real stories that she truly valued. Now, almost 11 years ago, on my mom's birthday, I asked her what she wanted as a gift. And she had just recently heard about Becky's regular Saturday morning calls with her mom, and she told me, "I want that. I want you to call me on Saturday mornings." So we started a new tradition, and for more than a decade now, we've talked almost every Saturday morning and shared our stories of that week. I've been told by my dad that this very quickly became one of the highlights of my mom's week, and not only did she enjoy the time to connect with me, but she savored the time to retell my stories to my dad later in the day. My mom became a friend of mine throughout these years of calls in a way that was different from our relationship before. I feel so much closer to her as a result. That's also made this loss more unbearable, and it feels like more than anything I can handle alone. Today is the third Saturday. I woke up unable to call my mom, but I've kept talking to her because I want her to know how much those calls meant to me. I want her to know their little boy, so full of energy and life, hasn't gone anywhere. But I don't feel like him today. Today I feel too sad. I feel a little bit more like that little baby on the dining room table that could really use his mom's arms wrapped around him. I love you, Mom. Miss you.
Thank you, Raymie. I want to invite Kitty's daughter-in-law, Becky, to come up.
When I heard this was the order that I would have to go in, felt pretty challenging, but I feel extremely honored to be here, first of all. Raymie and I are both in sales, so we script out our important meetings, and this is probably one of the most important talks I've ever given. I've known Kitty for about 12 years, and although it seems like yesterday, because I was just sitting at her house in Pasadena for the first time, trying to figure out which of the 4 drinks I was going to start with, because Kitty was always giving. If you've ever been at her house around mealtime, you would know what I mean. I don't know how she did it, but somehow she had a way of remembering things about people, and she loved surprising them with these things that she thought would brighten up their day. I've been around a fair number of Jim and Kitty's extended family over the past couple of weeks, and there's 2 things that I've heard over and over. First, most of them felt they were risking their life when they rode with her in her teeny tiny smart car. And the other one was Kitty was pure love. She really did look for the best in people, even when they were unfriendly or grumpy with her. I recently witnessed a perfect example of this. As you have heard, as you heard from Raymie, she loved her hospital staff. She knew everyone by name. She knew everyone's stories. And she had one staff member that was not particularly friendly. But Kitty never gave up on her. She had a special way of not taking offense and of assuming that there must be something going on in that person's life that was making them behave that way. And Kitty inevitably thought she might be able to help. The day Kitty died, she had Jim out in the halls looking for this particular person to give her a book that Kitty thought might be able to bring her some joy. That's just how Kitty operated. Kitty was fearless. And I'm not talking about how she braved the roads at high speeds in her smart car. I'm talking about the kind of fearlessness and confidence that comes from knowing yourself and wanting to get to know the world around you. I hear stories about when Kitty was younger and when she wasn't quite as sure of herself and not quite as experienced in the world. And I didn't know that Kitty. I suppose she went through a pretty amazing transformation over the course of her life, and if you'd like to hear more about that, you should spend some time talking with Jim. But by the time Kitty came into my life, she seemed to have no fear. I think Raymie recently called it dangerously confident, which summed it up pretty well. Also, I probably wouldn't be married to Raymie today if it weren't for Kitty. Her friends and family will tell you about her little butt kicks when she thought you weren't doing the right thing. Well, Raymie had thoroughly convinced me and thoroughly convinced himself that we didn't really need to be married, and that wasn't an important part of our relationship. Now, I wasn't there when he shared this news with Kitty. All I know is she had some very choice words for him. The next thing I knew, he was on one knee with a ring proposing. Thank you, Kitty. Kitty and I shared the same favorite color of yellow. To me, yellow is sunshiny and happy, and it just intuitively makes you smile and feel good. And I'm not 100% sure that's what it meant for Kitty, but I suspect it was something very similar to her. Her bright colors would light up the room. However, when I picture Kitty in my mind, it's her face and her smile that brings the light. And when I was looking through the pictures to share for the slideshow, there wasn't a single one of Kitty where she didn't have a big smile on her face. I think people like Kitty come into our lives to remind us that it's okay to spread joy, and we should try harder to avoid judgment, and we should look for the light in people, because it's there if we take a minute to look. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Going to invite Bob to come up. Bob's Kitty's brother.
I had stuff written down, but in listening to all of your comments and stuff, and just hearing the things the last couple days, looking at the Thrive conference that was last weekend, and hearing the things that all of you have experienced with Kathy, you know, I was, being her brother, not living close by, I did not experience all of that, but I experienced it in a different way with my sister Karen, growing up with her, and then I'm sure some of the different ones were watching online that grew up with her at the boarding school. I imagine there's a bunch of them listening, watching today, and can say yes if they, you know, knew Kathy in a different way. Kathy, being the oldest, was the first one to go away to boarding school, and she struggled with that. That was difficult for her those first couple years. And then when Karen and I came and joined with her, she didn't want us to struggle as much, so she became our mother at boarding school. And many of you have experienced her mothering. And so she became a real mother for us at that time, helping Karen and I just to get through those times. And then as we, many different experiences of being able to do that. But the other thing that has impressed me, and as I grew up with her and seeing, and not so much growing up with her, but in seeing all your responses and stuff, is the one word that has always been hers, that she loved people, and she loved to give gifts. Her love language was giving. And I think we've all experienced that and have been able to enjoy that part of her life. And so just growing up with her, being there in boarding school was the most time that we spent. And as Karen and I grew up and Kathy moved on, we didn't spend as much time. And so we're thankful that she found Jim right away when she came to the States, and Jim was able to care for her and help her to grow and to go past all the difficult experiences that she had in the boarding school. And we could see Kathy's growth in all that, and how she was able to help others then, others that she went through with even boarding school, and being able to help them and encourage them even in the difficulties that they're experiencing from the times that they had there. And so we're just grateful that we could be here, grateful for all the family that she developed in all of you, and the encouragement, and we'll just continue to pray for Jim and Raymie and James and the rest of the family out here as they experience a loss.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to invite Kitty's grandson, Quinn, to come up, and he's going to play the piano for Kitty and share some words.
First of all, I just want to thank you all for everything you've had to say. I unfortunately didn't get to see my grandmother as much as I would have wanted to throughout my life. And the more I've heard from everybody here, the more I've been able to relate to her and understand how much of me came from her. My name is Quinn Wilder. I'm Kitty's grandson. And there are many faces that I know aren't here right now that would love to be here. And I'm very gracious that we could all be here to sit in for the thousands upon thousands of people that have been affected by my grandmother. The presence of everybody here gives me the exact same joy that she did, and I haven't felt that feeling in a long time. I don't have much to say that hasn't already been said or hasn't been felt by your presence directly, but I do all want to give you just one more perspective upon how great my grandmother was. Kitty passed down to me the desire and the vocabulary to be appreciative for the smallest exchanges in life. I remember every single time I would be lucky enough to see her, she would take me to get blizzards at Dairy Queen. And boy, do I tell you as a kid, that was probably the most exciting thing ever. My sweet tooth hasn't gone away as I've aged, so I've spent the last couple weeks going in and out of Dairy Queen getting Heath blizzards just like she did. So next time you're at Dairy Queen, get yourself a Heath blizzard. She'd appreciate it. In those moments I got to spend remembering her generosity, I'm still learning and growing because of my grandmother's love. They don't taste the same when you don't have somebody you love nearby. And even the smallest treats have so much to offer in our lives and connections with other people. Not only did my grandmother share her time and treats with me, but she constantly loved hearing my music. I'm constantly practicing and being a musician in college. I'm learning new songs all the time, and every single time I'd learn a new one, I'd send it her way, and she'd give me all the support I could possibly need in the whole world. In a moment, I'm going to play an arrangement of a tune called I Love You Porgy, which I have chosen to call I Love You Nani. Nani is the name that I referred to her as. That's in Nigeria how you would call your grandmother. And so this was the most recent song I was learning, and unfortunately I wasn't able to share it with her. And so in the spirit of enjoying these small exchanges with one another, please share your ear the same way she did. I love you, Nani.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Quinn. So on behalf of Kitty's sister Karen, I'm going to share some words. I wish I could get up and share this in person, but you wouldn't be able to understand me through the tears. So Chris will read this for me. I've been so gifted to spend my life with such a sister. So many memories to share that it's hard to pick out a few. Kathy was 4.5 years older than me. Growing up in Africa and going to boarding school, she was the oldest and had to be sent off first, 400 miles away from Mom, Dad, Bob, and myself. She struggled with being sent away from Mom and Dad, but by the time Bob and I went to school, she was there for us. She was like a mother figure to us, and if I hadn't had her there, I may have struggled more at school as well. She was the one I ran to in tears, went down the hall to crawl in bed with her after I wet my bed, and just went to her for comfort when I was feeling lonely from Mom and Dad being so far away. She was always there to care for Bob and I. Kathy always teased me that I was adopted, and that Mom and Dad found me under a bush on the road out in Nigeria and decided to keep me. We have always laughed about that because the first time I heard it, I ran to Mom to ask if that was true. We were so different in so many ways, so she thought I was the odd one. Kathy and I love to travel together and have shared many traveling experiences. In our travels, people would ask if we needed separate rooms, and our answer was always no. We love sharing the bed at night and talking about our day and giggling and sharing stories and finding out in the morning who fell asleep on who. We had so many times where we have both got laughed so hard we could hardly catch our breath. We have had tears as well. We both shared our sorrows and joys with each other. Kathy loved Jim deeply and was so thankful to have such a wonderful husband. Jim has been a rock for almost 50 years. Her kids were the light of her life. If I was on the phone with her and one of the kids or grandkids called, she would tell me that she would call me back and she would take their call. They were a priority in her life and a treasure to her. Kathy was a very giving person, both of herself and of little gifts. Every visit with her, she had a big bag of goodies for me. I've seen that with others as well. I know she loved her time at teaching at Thrive, and she would get so excited about getting little gifts to share with the group. She was a good listener. She would always tell me she was glad to be with me when I was hurting or having those moments of joy. She loved to collect anything that said joy, as it was so important for her to share joy with others. Our last trip together was when she taught at YWAM in Kona, Hawaii. We talked about that trip and what a fun time we had together and all the laughs we had and the things we did and experienced. I think God knew we needed that, as he knew the future ahead for her and for me. We also went to the Thrive conference in Peoria, Illinois just after that, but she wasn't feeling well during that time. And when she came home and still wasn't feeling well, she went to the doctor and at that time found out she had leukemia. There was shock and tears. But through her journey of dealing with her leukemia and treatments, I have seen and heard of so many people that have been blessed by her. She was giving back to them with gifts and was sharing her stories about their ministry. I was on the phone with her when she was in the hospital, when the nurses would come in and she would get to know their names and who they were. Relationships were important to her, and letting her life be a testimony of who Jesus is. Kathy and I talked every night on the phone unless she was out of the country with her many travels of teaching with Jim. I am missing those talks so much now, as during the day I think of things that I want to share with her and I can't. I can almost see and hear her in heaven saying, "Get up." My African name, she called me. I can't wait for you to come join me here someday. You will love seeing Jesus, family, and having a new body with no pain. I am so thankful that God blessed her and blessed me with her in my life, and she is deeply missed. I'm so thankful that I have the assurance of being reunited with her in heaven again someday. I love you, sweet sister. Another one of Kitty's favorite verses is 2 Timothy 1 verse 17. Or 1 verse 7, sorry. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. I'm going to invite Jim to come up and share some words.
I'm going to adjust the microphone, but mostly to distract myself. Thanks, Cousin Travis. The big story of Kitty, really, about her life is how she overcame fear. Now, I'm not going to tell it because we don't have enough time. It's not the simplest of stories, and besides that, I'd have to say that most people won't be able to hear her story. Not because it can't be told, but because most people don't want to go to the places this story would take you. Because what most people fear is the way they're going to feel. What we fear always comes down to escaping how we're going to feel. And to do that, we avoid being present. So we have our mind someplace else, and then we don't feel what's actually happening. Now, what Kitty discovered was that with joy in her life, she could be present when feelings and when things happened. Joy for her meant that she would not be alone in whatever the moment was. Joy is we're glad to be together. So if I'm not alone, I can be there. And learning to be there was years in the making. Because of boarding school, this isn't on my script. But when I first met her, I asked her if she had a favorite color. And because in boarding school they never asked anything, she didn't even know that there were different colors. I think ultimately she decided all of them. But since it meant that she was not alone, the first thing was that she learned that I would want to be with her. The second thing, she learned that God would be with her. Now, I couldn't always be there, but God was always there. So she was not alone if she was present and if she was feeling something. Now, I want to make it maybe clear if I can, though it's hard to say. It wasn't her faith in God. I have never heard Kitty in her entire life mention her faith in God. It was not her belief in God. I've never heard her talk really about what she believed with God. It was that when she was in the moment, God was there. You might call it the presence of God. It was more than she could believe about. It was more than she could explain. It was more than she didn't have to have faith because he was there in that sense. It was that presence of God, and whenever she could be in the moment, including going into the dark moments of her life, she found that God was already there. That's why she learned to be in the moment with people. That's why she taught everyone she could to be present with their feelings. She wanted to know, what are you feeling? And we're going to be here with you. And if you look around, you'll notice that God is here with you too. She taught returning to joy, which basically meant that when you're too upset to notice anybody's with you, you have to get back to being relational. And if nothing else, she would volunteer to be the first one to be with you that you might notice right there. Raymie has his triathlon team, and they had a saying which is embrace the darkness. It's their way of talking about whatever it is you're feeling, you have to hold on to it. Now, Kitty would disagree with that a little in the wording. She would say, in the darkness, embrace your true self. Be who you were created to be. So she wasn't all that wild about darkness. She was wild about not letting the darkness make you forget who you were and why you were present right there. So let me explain that, and I'm going to do that by telling you a story within a story within a story. I'm telling you that ahead of time, otherwise you might think senility is setting in and I've lost my way. But Kitty was having a bad reaction to medication, and as a result she was losing control of her muscles, her emotions, and her mind. And I had to get her down to the hospital as well as I could. So it was winter. We had a bad snowstorm, ice storm. The roads were very icy, and I was driving down the 285. Some of you know where that is. And as we were driving down, because she couldn't breathe, she was having a panic attack. It was about all we could do to kind of get her in the car. So it was a very bad trip. And so to let her know she wasn't alone, I reached over and held on to her, which made me a little nervous because it was pretty icy right on those curves. But as I knew she felt appreciation because I was holding her, I asked her, where's God right now? And she said, let me look. The result was that she found that God was there breathing with her, or sort of not breathing with her. And he was sharing the I can't breathe feeling. He was sharing the I can't control my muscles feeling. He was sharing the I can't control my mind feeling. But he was there. And so, I guess, being overly trained as a therapist and also knowing that a little bit about her past, I said, I know the present is really terrible, but does God want to show you anything that might be adding to this that's coming from the past? And he took her back to a situation in her childhood, really infancy, where she wasn't able to breathe, and the nurses were being particularly obnoxious and not giving her medication, and to her it was a near-death experience. And she said, oh, God is with me here, and he's breathing with me. And then she sort of stopped, and he's with the nurses too. They need a lot of help. So with God breathing with her, we went down the hill. But how is it that she said, let me look? Because that's the hard part for most people to do on such a moment. We would have a hard time to look. And the reason she could say we look is that every night, as you begin to hear a lot, we would practice appreciation, especially ever since she got the diagnosis of leukemia. She would say 3 things that each of us had to share 3 things that we appreciated about God, 3 things that we appreciated about that day, and then 3 things that we appreciated about each other. And then I would rub her back until she could fall asleep because her body hurt, and so I needed to distract her a little bit. All of that practicing was now paying off on the way down the hill when she said, I'll stop and look. But how is it that we came to do that? Well, it turns out that, see, how old did you say that Matthew James is? 11? Yeah, so 11 years ago, Matthew James was born. And Jen was not sleeping through the nights because there was all this, baby going on. And so Kitty said, we have to fly out there, and I'll watch Matthew during the night so that Jen could get some sleep. And so we went out there and lived with you for a week, or she said three weeks. I was there maybe 1 week and I had to go back to work. But she was there for 3 weeks doing night shift with that. The first night that we got there, Jen still couldn't get to sleep. She was up about 4 hours or 5 trying to get to sleep, but she was too anxious and upset. So I thought to myself, well, how are we going to get Jen to feel appreciation so that she can go to bed with a little bit of joy? And I knew it wouldn't have been based on anything that happened well, first of all, I was thinking it isn't going to be Chris because she'd just been yelling at him about the pizza. That he had in the oven the wrong way, and I knew it wasn't anything about the day because she'd gone too many days without sleeping. So I thought, she probably can still think of something she appreciates about God. So I asked, can you think of anything you appreciate about it? Sure enough, she came up with 3 things for that. And I was thinking about Chris, and I knew he wasn't going to be appreciating Jen particularly at the moment. But I had seen how he liked the pizza. So I asked him, hey, Chris, you know, what are 3 things that you appreciate about the day? And he sort of stopped, and I said, well, how about the pizza? And he said, oh, yeah, the pizza. And we got rolling right there. So this is how these things came to be. Later on, Chris and Jen turned this into an exercise, as they often do with any good experience, and they call it the 3, 3, and 3 exercise. So 3 things about God, 3 things about a day, 3 things about each other. And this is what Kitty had picked up and reincorporated into our lives. So we did it every night, regardless of what happened that particular day. So she could then, with all of this in mind, stop and look and see where it was that Jesus was, how God was with her right then. So you might assume that with all this healing, she wouldn't have a panic attack, but that's not true. As soon as we got her down to the hospital and they started rolling her in, she couldn't breathe again, and she went into another panic attack down there. Because bodies that can't breathe have panic attacks. It's just what's going to happen to you. It's like, you know, there's some things that you don't control. When she came back out to where I could talk with her again, she was totally calm about the panic attack. Told me about it, but she wasn't interested in that. What she really noticed was how kind the nurses had been trying to give her oxygen and help her out of this particular attack. So it was not that the panic attacks don't happen, but she was somehow above that. It's like, well, that's what my body will do, but I'm here for the relationships. I'm here to engage with these nurses that are trying to get me while my body's out of control. There's something about that I think all of us need to know, that, you know, this having God with you does not mean you're in control of life. It means that somehow or another you are able to see what really matters even in the moments of great distress. And when Kitty got cancer, she needed more than joy and God. Now, I know everybody who's been properly trained spiritually says, well, God is all we need. But God didn't make us that way, at least not in Kitty's mind. She needed other people to be with her too, and she needed a role model. How do you live with cancer and death as a very sort of daily companion, or, you know, that sort of thing? And she found 2. One was Joey Feek, who was dying of cancer, and she was a musician, so she recorded a great deal about her life and experience, and the country music, and Kitty looked everything in the internet she could about Joey Feek. And although I don't care for country music, I was exposed to the whole business. Well, let's just go ahead and listen to Joey a minute singing about her cancer story. So we'll roll that. Same for Kitty, how she wanted to die. But she used to say to me, when I die, don't make me into Saint Myrtle. Now my mother's name was Myrtle, and once she died, my dad could not seem to deal with any of her flaws or faults or anything like that, and it surely annoyed her a little bit. And she said, I don't want you to do that. She might have rewritten some of the stuff Life Model Works is sending out, because, you know, it's like, I'm not Saint Myrtle. She really had one dark room left in her life she'd never entered. She knew about it. I knew about it. As a result of never having gone into that room, she left 5 relationships unresolved, because there's too many feelings that were coming out of, well, they were intruding into the present from whatever was going on back in that room there. She avoided that room for 10 years too long. And so leukemia took her energy in life before she found out that God was in that room. And I was already there waiting for her. As a result, you know, she never was one to put things off, but she sort of has left me in charge of trying to carry on. And resolve some of those relationships now that she doesn't have that. But even the last night that she was alive, she was wondering if God would want to receive her in heaven because of the feelings that were coming from that one dark room. The room in which she didn't want to be herself. She had not yet learned to be present there. And so consequently, she wasn't sure when all was opened up whether God would want to be with her. And most of us will have some spot in our life. I think we'd be extraordinarily lucky to have only one room left. But she would give you all a little butt kick herself and say, "No, don't follow my example there. Don't think because I had so much joy that I did everything I should have done." So her mother was Kitty's second role model for how to die. She was there when her mother died, so was Karen. Saturday came along for us. She was going to get chemo starting the next day. Saturday night, she said to me, "Jim, I'm dying." When I came to the room next morning, they had her on a ventilator. She couldn't breathe on her own. And they came in to talk about chemo, and she waved her fingernail. So after they had left, she wanted the mask taken off so she could talk. So I took it off from her, and she talked about, it's too late. Can't do this anymore. And one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, she straightened up, she put her back into the bed and sat back and said, "Now I'm going to die. I know how." Now, it was less than 24 hours later, she did. But she was waiting to die because Raymie was out doing an Ironman in Salem, Oregon. A half Ironman, but all the same. And she didn't want to interfere with his having a good run, and he did get his best time ever. And then he was going to fly back, and she wanted to make sure that he got some sleep after that long run before she came in, So she was doing her Iron Woman, Iron Mom. I'm going to just make sure I'm taking care of my kids right to the end. And then when he gets back and gets a little rest, well, angels brought them back sooner, and there was no rest really at that point for any of us. But that's kind of, both her determination and her stubbornness right there. Monday, she signaled that she wanted the machines turned off. So first thing in the morning, we were all there. I prayed for her once she lost the use of her own mind. I prayed some of the last words of Jesus. He said, and it's badly translated in most translations, but it said, into your control or into your hands, I give my breathing. And then he breathed his last. She said 3 things after that. Each one signaled that she was now feeling one of the 3 biggest feelings that she had feared all of her life. I had to be present and feel that with her. Her eyes were calm, and you might foolishly ask what she said and what she felt. But I don't think most people want to be there. But the peace in her eyes was just amazing. It was the most painful, way beyond sad horror I've experienced that I've ever felt. It was also the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Thank you, Jim. Another one of Kitty's favorite Bible verses is Psalm 56, verse 3 and verse 11. Whenever I am afraid, I will trust in you. In God I've put my trust. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? I want to invite Michael to come up.
Sometimes we need a story to help us deal with big emotions and big loss. And James, Jim and Kitty's son, wrote a story to help us process this loss and see the gardener's perspective. His words. Kitty first became ill with leukemia during the start of the COVID epidemic, and for 18 days was confined to the hospital without visitors. It was very uncertain that she would live, and she was desperate to be with family, and her condition was very close to the same as what took her life 16 months later. Moved to touch his mother's heart, James wrote the following story as one of several he sent to her. From James, here's another story for you, Mom. I love you. There was once a very wealthy gardener. He had many gardens and many plants. He planted trees and flowers. He planted fruits and vegetables. But his favorite was a rose bush. The gardener had planted the seedling of this beautiful rose bush in one of his many gardens, and she sprouted in a garden with many other exotic plants. There were animals that would come, and sometimes it was very dry. The rose bush, however, was very far from the bushes where she came from, and the rose bush was sad a lot. But the gardener was in the garden every day, and the gardener was very pleased to be with his rose bush. He knew that her roses gave joy to everyone and made his garden very beautiful. But the gardener also knew that for his favorite rose bush to grow and even be better, he needed to move her. So he decided to put his favorite rose bush in a new garden. The gardener also knew that the rose bush needed something special. The gardener planted a tall oak tree next to the rose bush to give her shade and be strong and steady. The gardener was very wise. The rose bush bloomed, and she enjoyed the tall oak tree. And the oak tree protected her from the wind and gave her restful shade. And the oak tree loved the rose bush, and the rose bush loved the oak tree. After a few years, the rose bush was surprised and delighted when an acorn took root between the oak tree and the rose bush and started growing another tree. A few years later, another acorn took root and started to grow. The rosebush was happy watching the young oak trees grow, and she watched as they became strong like her oak tree. The rosebush continued to bloom and to be happy. And the gardener was happy too. The gardener was in the garden with the rosebush every day. He enjoyed the roses that bloomed from her. She was beautiful, and he treasured her. But his favorite part was seeing how much the rest of the garden enjoyed the roses. He loved watching the birds sing around her. He loved how the oak trees grew stronger near her. And he saw how bunnies took shelter in her, and he smiled. And one day the rose bush got sick. She had an infection. And the gardener noticed right away because he loved his rose bush so much and always looked at every rose. And the gardener knew just how to take care of this special plant. And he knew also that it would be painful. The gardener began to trim and cut. He hated to see the rose petals fall. He cried because he knew that his favorite plant was suffering. But the gardener knew what was best for her, so he cut and he trimmed. And the gardener bought a very expensive pot years ago. In fact, he had bought the pot before the rose bush had even sprouted in the first exotic garden. And he bought the pot, and he put that pot in his very large house, and he prepared a spot in his favorite sitting room. And one day when the gardener was ready, he would take his beautiful rose bush and plant her in this priceless pot. And he would put her in his favorite sitting room, in his very large house, and he would smile at her. His favorite, his rose bush.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, James. I had the pleasure of having Kitty listen to me when I was going through getting my degree to become a pastor. I have to give some sermons, and I had the opportunity to give some sermons where Kitty could listen. And doing the events with Kitty and Jim, there was lots of opportunities for Kitty to listen to me talk and give me feedback, what we call good, healthy butt kicks. So I can almost hear her now saying, Chris, keep an eye on the time here. Stay in your voice, right? Keep your hands away from your mouth when you're talking. But I have a few words here that I think Kitty would appreciate. You can see the Gospels in the Bible tell us about a couple examples where women pour oil over Jesus. Scholars think these are actually three different times, three different moments where the oil is poured over Jesus. Sometimes it's over his head, sometimes it's on his feet. But in one of the examples in Mark, it's a woman we know to be likely to be Mary, who was the sister of Lazarus and Martha. And Lazarus was the one that Jesus raised from the dead. It's a very special relationship. And we learn that as Jesus is having a meal, it's hosted at someone's house, Mary comes in and she breaks an alabaster jar. And she pours this perfume over Jesus, starting with his hair, his head. And gravity works its course, so you can imagine it just going down, right, covering him. And we know from the context that this was done to prepare Jesus for his burial. So this was a very important moment. And we also know that this perfume was worth about a year's worth of wages. So this wasn't like the little sample perfume you get in the magazines. It's like, this is like a bottle, a glass bottle. And it's very pricey. It's very expensive. It's very valuable. It probably was the woman's most valued possession. She gave Jesus the best, most expensive thing that she could give him. And she poured it over Jesus. And you see, the glass had a very long neck, so you have to kind of break that neck on that glass bottle in order to pour it out. And once you open it, there's no undoing it. Once it's open, it's open. So you have to pour it out. So this was a very big deal when you understand the context. There's no going back. She was going to do this with the God that she loved. The smell would just fill the room. Like you could smell it coming out of the windows, the doors. It would just fill the space. And you could just smell the aroma and the smell of that perfume. So everyone around would know that that was happening. They would know that that was open, right? It just wafted throughout the room and the little house. And we also know it would be placed on Jesus because you're not going to hide that, right? It's all over. It's a very priestly thing to do, to be anointed. So that was a very important act that Mary was doing for Jesus. What's interesting is we don't hear any words from Mary. We don't hear that she said anything. She just brought this best gift that she could bring to Jesus, and she broke it and she poured it. So she doesn't say a word that's recorded, but Jesus tells us this act will be remembered wherever the Bible is preached. Everyone will talk about this act, what this woman just did. You'll hear about it. So this is very important. Now, some in the room become angry, right? They think, what a waste. Why are you wasting something so valuable? You know, we could go sell this in the market. We could give that money to the poor. And so it's, you know, the life model would call that the sark. So what my definition of what's good here and what's needed. And Jesus corrects them and says, no, actually what she did was just the right thing. She gave me the best gift that she could give me. And it's preparing me for what's coming ahead. So Jesus defends her. When I heard from Jim that Kitty had passed, the first thought in my head was a picture. And the picture in my head, I'm kind of a visual thinker, I guess. So this immediate thought in my head when Jim shared was I had this image of a broken perfume bottle being broken. But then the smell just filling the earth. Just couldn't be contained. You couldn't hide it. So through the brokenness of Kitty's loss, of her health, of everything that she went through, only God could take that and bring life and joy and something beautiful that would impact people all over the world. So that spoke to me, how Kitty's legacy is reaching people. As Ray shared, you know, I was on the call with my Korean friends, and when I shared with them about Kitty, they just wept. They just wept because they knew Kitty or they heard of Kitty, and Kitty impacted their lives. So I think Kitty, you know, I think her life really is a testimony. Like Kitty gave Jesus the best gift that she could offer. That was her. That was the best gift. I give you myself. Here you go. And so it's pretty amazing what Jim shared about, and Ray shared about how Jim and Kitty both believe that somehow God was going to take this awful, awful thing and somehow bring something good and something of the kingdom, something life-giving, and it's going to impact the world. So my big thought here is like, what would Kitty want us to do? Like, you know, she could share something right now. What would she say? You know, we've all heard about Kitty's butt kicks. I've been on the blessed receiving end of many of those butt kicks. Kitty was a truth teller. I could count on truth from Kitty. I knew that she would be honest with me and real about what she was feeling, and that really inspired me. It takes a certain amount of love and care for humans to be able to do that. I still struggle with that. So Kitty's been one of my best examples of how to be able to stay yourself while you love people enough to say things that might be hard to hear, but it's gold. She's given us gold when she would give us a butt kick. Jen and I first started dating at Thrive. I had a chance to do introductions, and I forgot to introduce Jen as my significant person that I was dating at the time. And Kitty found me when I walked off the stage, and she kind of pulled me inside. She said, Chris, you missed it here. You didn't introduce Jen as that important person in your life. And if that was me, that would really hurt my feelings. I don't know if I've ever moved faster in my life, but I went back to that stage, grabbed the microphone, and corrected that. I was grateful for Kitty, you know, sharing that with me. I would have missed a very important part of that week. When Jen and I would spend time with Jim and Kitty, one of the things we would often do when they had time with us or the kids would be to just ask, you know, what do you see in us that needs help? What do we need to be working on? You've seen the kids, how are they doing? What should they be working on? What can we do? And I could count on them to just tell me the truth. If I'm being dismissive, they could tell me that. Whatever it was, I knew they would tell me. I didn't have to wonder if Kitty was going to hold on to it. I knew if Kitty's got something to say, I'm going to hear it. And we were grateful for that. I honestly don't know where I'd be today without those butt kicks. I honestly don't know where I'd be today. Those butt kicks were valuable. And I think Kitty would probably tell us, you know what, follow my example. Follow my example. Don't be afraid to tell people, to bring correction, to guide people, right? It's one of the best gifts that we could give them. I think she would also say be gentle protectors. As I mentioned earlier with the masks, it was very important for her to have other people recognize the need to be gentle protectors with others. Even if you don't agree, if you don't agree about certain things over coronavirus and so forth, Kitty was still very vocal about we need to be gentle protectors with each other. And this world is in a place right now where we have numerous opportunities to really demonstrate that. No shortage of opportunities. I think Kitty would also say to be generous. She was very generous, as you've heard. She loved to give gifts. When I would go visit Jim and Kitty in California, she would take me to the local farmer's market. And she knew that I liked the Schmore candy bar covered in chocolate. And every time I was there, she said, well, Chris, Saturday morning, no matter what Jim's doing, we need to go to the farmer's market and get you that s'more. And she knew I liked Burrito Express, so she would also make sure that we went to Burrito Express. She was always looking for ways to bless people with generosity. I think Jim said it well. I think she would also say it's important to listen to God. Just listen to God. She demonstrated that it's possible to develop that. It's very possible. I think she would also tell us, to enjoy our time here. I can remember one of the early times I started working with Jim. We were at a conference where Jim was speaking. And Kitty and Jen and I were in the back, we're running the book table talking about who was faster or something. So Kitty decided we need to race. So right there in the back of this conference in the gym, Kitty takes off her shoes and she's like, let's go. So we're racing while Jim is up there speaking in a very dignified way. We're in the back racing. So I really respected Kitty. She just knew how to have fun. I think she would also say to just make a difference in this world. When I look at our family, our marriage, our ministry, all of that's been deeply, deeply impacted and transformed by Kitty. In fact, I wouldn't even have been working with Jim all these years if not for Kitty. So when I first met Jim, and I started to listen to him, I thought, this guy's on to something. I would love to just sit at his feet and learn. And years ago, a friend had told Jim that you need to really raise up some people for the next generation so that your stuff continues in this world. Jim thought that was really valuable, but he forgot about it. But Kitty did not forget. And one day, she said, Jim, I wonder if Chris is one of those young people that you're supposed to mentor and train. I don't even know how to really tell you how impactful that's been in my life and my family. And so I have Kitty to thank for remembering that and planting that seed in Jim that we could do that. When we found out about losing Kitty, it hit my family hard. And one day I heard my sons fighting. And they were fighting over a toy when I walked into the room. And I heard the one brother say, well, I'm going to break your toy. And I said, all right, come here. We got to go talk. So I pulled him aside. And I was finishing something. I turned around and I saw him sitting on the floor just weeping. Oh, that's kind of weird. What's going on, buddy? And he said, well, that was a toy that Nani gave me. And I think all of us probably feel some of that. Like she gave us so much. And it's hard. But I think Kitty would also say to just suffer well together. Like we're not alone in this. Just to suffer well together. Let's emulate and follow Kitty's character. Let's follow her example and be the kind of people who love well. So let us pray. Lord God, I'm just thankful for the life and legacy of Kitty Wilder. Lord, I thank you that we can come together to testify of your goodness and your faithfulness and your love to us through Kitty. Lord, I thank you for the gift that she was, will continue to be as her legacy does live on and just fill the earth with a beautiful fragrance that reflects your kingdom. And so, Lord God, I do pray for your Spirit, that great comforter, to comfort us and to be close as the family and the community grieves this loss. Lord, I know that we honor Kitty when we also share stories of her. So, Lord, put those ideas in our minds to share her legacy and share those stories. And Lord Jesus, we do thank you that Kitty's life leads to you. And so, Lord God, I just pray you continue to lead us, guide us, speak to us. Let us honor and reflect you. And thank you for the gift of Kitty Wilder. We love you, Jesus. Amen. So before I close with the blessing here, there's a few instructions here I just want to pass along. First of all, I want to thank Pastor Kurt, Suzanne, and this church for blessing us and providing the facilities and the refreshments that we'll have here soon. The church has just been so gracious and generous with us. And I know that it'd be important to also acknowledge and thank all of you, for those of you who are here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for honoring her desire to create a place where joy can spread instead of viruses. So thank you for the mask. And I think all of our friends at home who are with us, I know people are watching this from all over the world. And so I just want to thank my friends who also, there are some who thought about coming, but they decided to stay back and they decided to watch this online. And there's just people all over the world watching this. So we just thank our friends who are also watching this and joining us online. You might notice there's scarves. These beautiful, colorful scarves are all around the room here. So Kitty had basically let people know. People love to give Kitty gifts because she always gave them gifts. They just wanted to bless her in some way. So Kitty said, if you want to give me a gift, give me a scarf. I don't know how many scarves are here, but I'm here to tell you there's a lot of scarves here. And the family thought it would be very special to those of you who are here to be able to grab a scarf if you would like a scarf. So these are here for you to grab and in honor of Kitty. That would be very meaningful for her. So grab one while supplies last. The Forever Missed website. So there's this website called Forever Missed where you can post memories, you can post your pictures of Kitty and with Kitty and more. I want to invite you. It's Forever Missed is the website, all just Forever Missed all together, no space. And then search for Kitty Wilder and you will find that page. Please join us in sharing memories and posting pictures. There's lots of good stuff is there. I think Kitty would also give us all a good little butt kick to be protective as we go out. Continue to find those opportunities to be tender with weaknesses, to protect one another, and to use opportunities to build some joy. So one of the common things we would do at Thrive is we end each day with the Aaronic benediction. I think Kitty enjoyed that. And so we're going to close with just the Hebrew version and then the English version. So Yevarekaka Adonai v'yishmereka. Ya'ir Adonai panevaleka v'kuneka. Yisa Adonai panevaleka v'yasem leka shalom. May the Lord now bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Thank you for honoring the life of Kitty Wilder. There's going to be lots of wonderful pictures that we're going to share here on the screens. And Pastor Kurt, you have any final words? Okay. On behalf of the Wilder family, we thank you and bless you and invite you to stick around to share stories and enjoy refreshments and enjoy the pictures of Kitty Wilder and friends and family. Thank you.